So, what is a toddler tantrum? Of course, you know what it looks like. It's hitting, the kicking, the screaming, the flopping, the refusing. But what is actually going on underneath? Have you ever felt like your child's meltdowns come out of nowhere and nothing you say seems to help? You're probably trying to fix the tantrums with logic, calm talking, and consequences. But here's why it's not working. Toddler tantrums aren't random like we feel they are. And this is how we're going to turn meltdowns or tantrums into teachable moments using a simple 5-step method that actually works in real life. My 5-step strategy was actually mentioned in the #1 international selling book that I co-authored in called The Perfectly Imperfect Family: Real Solutions for Mindful Parents Navigating Today's Biggest Challenges. So we're going to go through each of the steps and then we're going to talk about a real life example afterwards. So the first step is to identify the trigger. The second step is to understand the emotion. Steps 3 through 5 are to replace, practice, and adjust. And we're going to talk about exactly what that means as we go through this. So back to step 1, identifying the trigger. Tantrums aren't random. They follow a pattern. And so I'm going to introduce to you the 4 most common tantrum types and tantrum triggers, although there are more, which I talk about in my course, Transform Tantrums, a listening toddler in 7 days. So parents respond to the behavior they see: the screaming, the hitting, the running away, without realizing there's a specific trigger underneath it. So in this step, we're going to look at the 4 most common tantrum types so you can start to decode what's actually going on beneath the surface and we can help them best. So for each one, I'm going to show you the trigger, what caused it, what it might look like on the outside to you as the observer, what you're likely thinking as the parent, and what it's actually about, because then we can help support them best. The first tantrum trigger is change or lack of routine or predictability. This can be caused by unexpected changes, disruptions in routine, or new environments. And what it looks like is a big meltdown when a nap is skipped, when plans change, driving home a different route than your toddler's used to. They notice it and they melt down. You might be seeing clinginess or crying when you drop your child off at daycare or you're starting a new school or a new routine. Maybe you see this popping up when your child was off from a school break and now they're transitioning back. You might be seeing screaming or tantrums during a family trip or when a new sibling or baby arrives. And so these are all changes in routine or predictability for your child. So what you think is the parent often is like they're overreacting. Like, why are they acting like this? Why are they being so emotional about this? You've already explained it to them, so shouldn't they know? But what's actually happening is their nervous system is overwhelmed and trying to make sense of the change. Predictability equals safety for toddlers. And when that's disrupted, their regulation systems are totally thrown off. And that is a skill they just don't have yet. The second tantrum trigger that can be common is control and autonomy struggles. So if your child's not getting what they want or being asked to do something that they didn't choose or they don't want to do, this is when this pops up. It looks like saying no to everything, running away when it's time to get dressed, hitting or throwing when told to clean up or leave. And this is what parents think. My child's being defiant. They're just testing all my boundaries. And what's actually happening is they're seeking independence. When they feel powerless, their body pushes back. It's not disobedience. It's a developmental need for autonomy showing up through resistance. The third tantrum trigger is transition tantrums. So moving from one place to another, one activity from another, especially when it wasn't their idea or they were deeply engaged with what they were doing before, or the thing that they're being asked to do is not preferred. So this could look like screaming or collapsing when it's time to leave the park, running away at bedtime. It could be a meltdown when asked to stop a preferred activity at school or at home. This is how it feels to us as parents. They never listen. They make everything harder than it needs to be. And what's actually happening is their brain struggles to shift gears, especially if the new activity isn't as desirable. It's not just refusal. It's a mismatch between their internal plan and their external reality. And the fourth tantrum trigger, and the last one I'm going to give for today's video, is frustration and disappointment. And this is something that I've coined as picture perfect mindset. So the trigger is really that reality is not matching your child's expectation of what they expected or imagined. It can look like them crying because their cereal isn't in the purple bowl, or maybe you cut the banana wrong. It could be screaming when a toy doesn't work how they thought it would. It could be a full meltdown when the park trip is canceled due to rain and you have to go later, or there's some kind of change in plans that was unexpected. We could often feel like our children, when this happens, are being dramatic, they're upset over nothing, or they're still going to get the thing. Can't they just understand? We're just not going now, which pulls on waiting and future orientation and planning, which are skills our toddlers don't have yet. It's a skill they need to be exposed to, build, and understand over time. So what's happening is they have the mental picture and it got shattered. That disappointment feels huge in their body and they don't have the skills to adapt to that. This isn't about logic. It's about emotional regulation. So this isn't about bad behavior. It's about their nervous system overloaded and unmet needs. Once you see the pattern, you can respond more skillfully. And I just gave you the 4 tantrum triggers. And if you want a quick reference to help you recognize these patterns and what to do in the moment, I've created a free guide called The 7 Toddler Struggles and How to Solve Them Fast. It's an amazing tantrum and behavior guide. It breaks down this real life examples with simple steps to take. So go ahead and grab it now. The link is in the description and pinned in a comment below this video. So we just talked about the first step, which is understanding the trigger. Now we're going to talk about step 2, understanding the emotion. This one is just as important and one we really don't want to skip over. Behavior is communication. So your toddler's meltdown or their tantrum is communication. So ask yourself, what emotion is driving this, their behavior, their trigger that's upset them? Is it frustration? Is it disappointment? Is it overwhelm? When your toddler throws a toy, flops on the floor, or yells no, they're not being irrational. They're expressing something they don't have the words yet for, or they don't have an appropriate channel or way to communicate everything that's building up in their body. That itself is also a skill. A helpful reframe is, instead of saying, why are they doing this to me? Instead say, what are they showing me that they can't do yet without me? And when we teach a skill, what they can't do, that timing also really matters because it's the difference between teaching when their brain is offline. Think about it when the Wi-Fi isn't connecting, so they can't download the lesson from you. So when we do teach strategically and thoughtfully and intentionally, we want to make sure they actually can learn the lesson and the skill so they can take in the information more easily. Otherwise, we're trying to force something that just won't happen, which often fuels the meltdown to become worse or escalate. And when a tantrum or a meltdown escalates, we can see screaming, hitting, or more behaviors popping up. The feeling of having our child actually pick up something that we have taught them and use it is really rewarding. We don't want to work against the emotional current of our toddler. We want to channel it and work with it so they can learn best and we're not overexerting ourselves and burning ourselves out. So that's where I want us to think of this baseball analogy. Trying to teach a new skill during a meltdown is like trying to coach a batter while the pitch is already coming. It's too overwhelming. That's not the right time. They're in the middle of a swing. They're in mid-swing. In that moment, they can't absorb anything new. They can only use what they've already practiced. And it's the same with your child. During a meltdown, their thinking brain goes offline. They're running on emotion, not logic, and they're not available for learning, reasoning, or lectures, or even compliance. So when we try to teach during mid-meltdown, we are missing the moment. But you are actually teaching something during a meltdown. You're not teaching words, rules, or problem solving, which is what many parents make the mistake of doing, even if they're doing it calmly. What you're teaching is presence, safety, and regulation. I call it regulation teaching because that's exactly what it is. It's not the kind of teaching we're used to, but it might be the most powerful kind. Because what your child feels from you in that moment becomes the template for how they learn to handle big emotions later. So as we move into the next steps from what we've already learned, finding the trigger, understanding the emotion, we're going to go through steps 3 through 5, replace, practice, and adjust. Keep this in mind. Regulation teaching happens during a meltdown. Skill teaching happens before and after. Both matter. So your job isn't to correct, it's to decode the emotional signal and connect. So here is steps 3 through 5. We're going to replace, practice, and adjust. Step 3, choose an empowered replacement behavior or way to channel your child's energy. It could be, instead of screaming, they say, "My turn next," or stating, "I'm mad," and stomping or squeezing something appropriate, like a calming fidget, instead of hitting or pushing when they're upset. We're replacing what they are doing with something more appropriate. It's a skill that they do not have, and we are going to proactively teach it to them. Remember, we want to teach this type of skill when they're already calm, and then we can give them reminders as they get agitated or frustrated, but not in a full-blown meltdown do we want to be teaching "my turn next." So step 4 is to model and practice. So we're going to show them. We can practice and praise in the calm moments. So I have a quick story to illustrate this at IHOP, actually, when my toddler almost went into a meltdown while eating a pancake. So I will get into that right after I talk about step 5, which is adjust as needed. So often, I think in parenting, we get this strategy or this script or something and it doesn't work, right? So that's why it's not so concrete like that. We can adjust. So we can try something, we can adjust it and make sure it meets the needs of our child, because if it's not working, there may be something that just needs a tweak. So if "my turn" is too hard for your toddler, you could use a gesture, teach them a gesture, meet them where they are. Maybe they use a picture card instead. Maybe they point to something that means it's their turn. We can meet them developmentally where they are, because toddlerhood ranges between the ages of 1 and 4. So there's a big difference in gap in the skill your child might have depending on the age and their maturity and where they are developmentally, because every child is different. So now we're getting into the real life example of a meltdown in public using my 5 steps to less meltdowns method. And this one is fun because it has to do with eating pancakes. So now that we understand why skill teaching doesn't work mid meltdown, let me show you what it does actually look like in real life. We're teaching before the meltdown escalates or gets too intense, right? So when our child is still teetering on frustration or disappointment, but their brain is still online, there are certain things we can do where we're not telling them to do something, but we can model it. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by this. So I'll walk you through a quick story that shows exactly these 5 steps to less meltdowns without lectures, without power struggles, and without needing my toddler to behave better. So this happened at IHOP. My son was furious, not at me, but at his pancakes. His fork was not grabbing the pancake the way he wanted it to, and he started to spiral. He wasn't melting down yet, but he was right on the edge of it. So here's what I did. The first thing was I identified the trigger. That's the first step. The trigger here wasn't about the pancake itself. As the parents, we often can think it's about the pancake. Just chill out about your pancakes, right? But it was the mismatch between what he expected to happen and what was actually happening. This is trigger number 4 I mentioned earlier in the video. He expected to get the pancake with his fork and eat it. When it didn't go that way, his brain went into frustration. That was the trigger. Reality doesn't match the mental picture of what I should be able to do. So step 2 is understand the emotion. What he was feeling was frustration and disappointment. It wasn't working like how he planned. This wasn't about discipline. It was about emotional regulation. And because he wasn't in a full meltdown, I knew I could use this moment to model the skill, not correct or lecture the skill or give consequences or threats. If you don't stop acting like this, we're leaving, which could increase or escalate the behavior even more, not just manage the behavior. That leads me to step 3. What did I do? I choose empowered replacement behavior. So instead of correcting him or telling him to stop doing what he's doing or using threats or bribes, I showed him. I picked up my fork. I tried to get the pancake with my fork and I said, "Oh no, mommy's fork is stuck too. This is so frustrating." Then I exaggerated my breath, a long, slow exhale, and I tried again. I said, "Sometimes when I get frustrated that this isn't working, I can take a breath." I didn't tell him to calm down. I modeled what it looked like to try again while staying in your body. That's the replacement behavior, a breath, a reset, a retry. So then we went to step 4, practice and praise. So I modeled it. He copied. I didn't tell him to copy. I didn't expect him to copy, but he did. And because he wasn't melting down, his brain was still open to learning, not learning with pressure. That's why modeling is so beautiful. And sure enough, he watched me and mirrored the breath. He started taking breaths and trying. I praised his effort, because this is practice and praise. And I didn't praise the outcome, but I praised the effort. Wow, that's such a great job taking a breath, right? Acknowledge, praise that. You're trying again. You're doing a great job taking breaths. Great job trying again. The effort, not the outcome. And the moment taught him more than a dozen calm down lectures ever could. Now, this is where step 5 comes in, adjust as needed. You're going to see why. So I did have to adjust a little. He was now taking breaths, but he still couldn't do the task of getting his fork to get the pancake. And I tried a small attempt of hand over hand, so a proximity to help him, and it spiked trigger number 2. So if I would have forced the hand over hand and said I had to help him, right? That is a control autonomy trigger for him that was getting activated. He wanted to do it himself. Doesn't that sound familiar? So I modeled where it was tricky to eat the pancake and where it was dense on the edges, and how the center of the pancake was more fluffy and easy to scoop and stab with the fork. So I modeled the skill. I don't have to do this when it's hard. I can find an easier or different way to do this, and I can come back to what frustrates me later. That's a skill. I don't have to stay stuck. I can problem solve. So with my own fork, I was like, the edges are hard to get, but the center, I can get the center. I modeled that to him. And that tiny shift, showing instead of telling, was all it took to de-escalate him. And he was able to do the same thing and copy the same behavior I did, where he was scooping his fork where it was easier to get the pancake. And what happened was, what could have been a full-blown meltdown, where he's flopping all over the floor of IHOP, became instead a calm experience where he ate his pancakes for 15 minutes peacefully after that. It was the most calm I've ever been in a restaurant with my kids. And this was an emotional moment for my son, and I changed how I responded to it. So now let's bring it all together. Here's the thing. A lot of parenting advice tells us to focus on stopping the hitting, the running away, the screaming. And what happens is we zero in on the moment. But I want to invite you to see a deeper shift. The goal isn't to change the moment. What if the goal is to change the pattern? Because tantrums don't happen in isolation. And we were talking about what are tantrums. We talk so much about what they are in this video. They're part of a pattern of how transitions are handled, how power struggles play out, how emotional moments are responded to. And when we change the pattern, the moment changes naturally. That's exactly what the 5 steps to less meltdowns are designed to do. So let's go back to the question that brought you here. What is a toddler meltdown, really? Here's what it's not. It's not bad behavior. It's not manipulation. It's not a child being difficult on purpose. A toddler meltdown is a nervous system on overload, an emotion with no clear outlet, a moment where the brain goes offline, and a communication of what they cannot express yet in words or actions that are more appropriate. A signal that a skill is missing, not that a rule was broken. A cry for co-regulation, not just correction. And when we understand that, everything shifts. So what do we do in a toddler meltdown? We identify the trigger. We understand the emotion. We offer presence and connection, not pressure, which is correction or control. We teach certain skills before and after, not mid-swing. We give support by staying flexible in our approach, and we readjust as needed. So we just talked about the 4 tantrum triggers, and it might have you thinking, but wait, my toddler melts down for no reason. You're actually not missing the moment itself, the tantrum that seems to come out of nowhere, but you're missing the pattern. I'm working on a video right now that goes deep into this, so meltdowns and tantrums don't hit you off guard unexpectedly and throw your whole day off. Hit subscribe so you don't miss any of my next upcoming videos that are going to be so helpful for you with navigating toddler behavior, meltdowns, and more.